I really enjoyed the first couple of sessions, but also really enjoyed lots of conversations in the coffee break. I hope you did too. So this is our second and final panel session for the day. And what we want to do here is really explore where the use of technology in legal services is heading over the next 10 years. And we're going to keep a particular focus on AI and how that may change how solicitors work. We've already touched on this a bit. But also, a matter that's really important to me as well, and I know to all of you, is how clients can access and use legal services. And I think the potential of technology and AI as an enabler for that needs to be, front and center of our minds. So we've got another great panel for you to pick up these issues. Anjali, I'm not going to introduce again, but I'm glad you're able to join us. So on my left, we've got Ewan Willers, who is regulatory lead at Amplified Global, and I'm sure we'll get into the details as we talk. On Anjali's left is John Bartman, who is co-founder of the European Legal Technology Association. And on the far left, your right, is my colleague Chris Hanford, Director of Regulatory Policy at the SRA. So I'm going to adopt a similar format from the session earlier. We do have some questions that we will kick off with, and then there will be opportunity to have the conversation with people in the room as well. So I'm going to kick off with a question to you and Anjali and John, really, because I'm really interested to just get your individual perspectives on how and where you think that AI is most likely to change the landscape for legal services and for consumers over the next 5 to 10 years. Ewan, shall I come to you first?
Sure, no problem, thank you. So one of the issues that I think we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years is that I think there's a great focus on AI in terms of ChatGPT and its ability to generate language and so on, but actually it can power a lot of innovation that has nothing to do necessarily with language generation and those kind of things. It can empower new techniques that can actually achieve something that's been impossible previously. So for example, we use AI and machine learning to assess how intelligible, how understandable written communications is. And it sounds like a slightly niche thing, but actually it's an issue for legal services in the sense that while you need to be specific, and there's often technical and legal language used in lots of legal communications, they need to be understandable by the reader. And the reader is not always legally trained, but even for legal professionals, having a more understandable document that retains all of its integrity in terms of the communication, the information that's being portrayed, leads to a better understanding outcome. It can lead to lots of other benefits in terms of people being much clearer about what they need to do, their risks, their obligations. It can improve access to justice by taking away some of that impenetrable language. And so we've been working with the SRA to test how this might work in a legal circumstance, how legal professionals might benefit from, in this case, intelligibility assessment and a guided journey to simplify documents. It's AI, but it's not AI in the sense of ChatGPT. That's what powers it in the background. That's what's under the hood. And I think that can bring enormous benefits potentially to the legal profession, but also to consumers. They can begin to understand quite technical, complex issues in a much simpler way if you bring this information to light. So AI is helping to bring about better consumer understanding, better engagement, hopefully better access to justice, and we think probably more efficient and actually more understandable legal outcomes for lawyers, solicitors, legal professionals generally.
Yeah, that's great, and a really positive vision for the next few years. Anjali, can I ask the same question of you, of just your perspective on what, how things are going to evolve?
Yes, certainly. And I think something that Ewan said that's really important is the language aspect. So, there are benefits outside of that. But certainly as lawyers, our craft is very much language-based. We are advising, we are representing our clients in court, we are drafting documents. So we've already seen tremendous amount of efficiencies being gained with leveraging AI, generative AI in this space. The use cases in terms of assessing how we can really use AI. We're seeing chatbots, we are seeing automation systems, we are seeing more streamlined processes and approaches, which again, all these things I think will only serve to, one, make us more efficient, and two, reduce costs and potentially by that way also improving access to justice. Because, I also think employees and clients will require more in terms of efficiency and enabling them, to do their best work. And I think generative AI has a role to play in that. So, we're at the early stages, and I think with the amount of data that's out there now, the fact that computation itself is kind of advancing, the use cases, the training, the skills, I think as all these things improve, AI, generative AI will also improve, the uptake will also improve, and the sophistication of what we can use it for will also improve as well. Thank you.
Great. And John?
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more with Anjali. We're at the beginning of this revolution. And we don't even know where we are, whether we're at the very bottom of the mountain, whether we're just at the start of it. So the next few years are going to tell. I spend my life looking at new legal tech solutions. Actually, the co-founder of the Law Tech Consultancy, which helps, and a board member of the European Legal Tech Association. But I see probably 2 to 3 new solutions every week. We've taken on funding from the Legal Tech Fund that actually see 15 new solutions every week. The scale of that is huge. So where it's going to be in 5 years, I would turn that around and say, where is it going to be in 2 years? Where is it going to be in 1 year? Because so many new solutions are coming out, and we don't know where it's landing just yet. It's such an exciting time, and that's for law firms of any size. So it used to be that you'd have to be with a really big law firm in order to adopt technology. And now, actually, I work with a number of solo law firms with 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 fee earners. It doesn't matter where you sit because there's technology that's right for you. And then working out how the AI is going to make your life easier and save time, effort, and money. That's where the future's going to be.
Yeah, and that was a big theme from the earlier discussion, and I think we'll get into, some of the routes of navigation into the future, won't we? Chris, can I also come to you? A slightly different perspective. Obviously, part of our role as regulator is to look ahead to see what's coming, and crucially to work with law firms and tech providers to really understand how best to accommodate and enable, technological advances, in a positive way, and certainly without compromising public protection. So, specifically on AI and into the future, what's your perspective on where we're heading?
Yeah, I'll pick up a few points that have come up earlier and just re-emphasize them. I think firstly, we do a lot of work talking to the larger law firms where we have relationship management. All of them really are looking at AI, looking at use cases. Some of it is fear of missing out. Some of it is because they've got the problems, et cetera, that we've talked about and can see where the benefits come. More and more small firms are interested, but as have been mentioned earlier, there are those barriers that still exist. Do they have the know-how? Can they see the business benefits? They think they can't afford to do it. But as more and more stuff like ChatGPT comes in people's consciousness, and more sort of cheaper use of existing things and cheaper and different kind of commercial solutions come through, people are more interested in that. I think the second point that is around the fear that lawyers have that they will be put out of a job. And I think what we've heard about, and I think is right, is that it can really focus their expertise on where it's most needed, on those complex legal problems, solving those in advice, and a lot of the other stuff that can be a distraction, that can be automated. And then I think I'll give just a couple of examples, 3 examples of things that I've seen from or have been speaking to people about recently that just interested me. So one is around how AI is helping with sort of the searching data, collating data, structuring data, and presenting data in new ways. And I was talking from some counterparts from Australia, and they were telling me about some firms that are using an AI product in divorce settlements for financial statements, drawing all of that together. Used to take paralegals weeks to do that, and because they're open to, the different parties involved are open to sharing the access to the data in a secure way, then that's now being done in kind of days with using automation. Second is around sort of triage work allocation, risk identification and training, particularly in conveyancing, talking to people who are developing products in conveyancing that's using AI to pick up the cases coming in, identifying where the complex ones are, where you might need the real expertise in your more senior caseworkers, and also where there are particularly risks, so you need greater controls, but then taking it right the way through to these are the areas where fee earners within your firm needs training, and that's all being done with AI in an automated way. So really interesting there. And the third one is a family practitioner that I was talking to who is exploring the idea of using AI to try and persuade a party in a divorce, a family matter, who thinks they've been hard done by, that going to court is not always the right answer and actually won't give them the outcome that they want. And they've been doing some sort of market research with their clients, and what they're finding is that if you can say that there's AI and an algorithm is showing that you won't get the outcome that you want and this is a better solution, that actually holds sway with quite a lot of them, and I think that can be a really useful way to actually try and change some of that culture. Don't know whether that will work or not, but it shows where some of the thinking is going, and it's really, really interesting, I think.
Yeah, and I think some of the really interesting insights, they don't even need to necessarily be an answer that everyone adopts kind of long term, but the learning from trying different things and those examples, I think it is crucially important. You touched on it, and it came up in the conversation that we've already had earlier. I mean, obviously, law, has regulation in this sector, and John, I wonder if I can come to you first. The question is really, what do you see then in terms of, the fear that maybe regulation can have a chilling effect on the development of AI or other technology? What are the challenges there, and how do we overcome them?
Yeah, look, at the moment we've got a very open space. It's not particularly well regulated. We've had some regulations that have come out. Obviously, the EU have brought out their regulations, but it doesn't go very far. It was 800, 900 pages, of which a lot of it didn't really even make sense to the common man. So it's kind of interesting. I think that there's going to be more regulation, and I think, well, certainly what the EU report was really bringing out, which is that we've been very focused on how AI, especially Gen AI, is going to be used for goodness and how we're going to save time and how we're going to use it. But I think the report really highlighted that there's going to be a sinister side, that people aren't...
John, sorry to interrupt. I think we're not quite picking up on the headset mics.
Is that better?
Can people hear if we use the handheld?
Is that okay? Sorry.
Thank you.
So I think this year we're going to see something really interesting, which is going to be how we're going to use generative AI for negative aspects, and how criminals are going to work out how to deep fake and how to actually start performing tasks using Gen AI that are going to be fairly bad. So regulation is going to become more and more important in that.
Yes, no, I can see that, and it's those two angles, isn't it? The making sure that the regulation on doesn't curb innovation, but then this important role for protection. I was going to ask Angie the same kind of question of kind of those perspectives on the role of regulation, and I'm not sure, Angie, if I ask you to answer, and if we need to, we can pass the mic across.
Okay.
Can we hear Angeli okay? Okay.
So it's evident that, the pace of innovation, I mean, look where we were in 2022 with ChatGPT, now to Copilot in all the tools we're using, access to, quite a lot of information and data, the pace of innovation has outstripped the pace of regulation. And I think that has meant that people look at AI cautionary, and we're scared to dive in. And I think both on the supplier side and the customer side, regulation will help to allay some of those fears. I think it's the point you made about regulation not going too far in kind of curbing innovation or preventing innovation, but almost setting principles that we can turn to know that we're making the right choices. And I feel like some of what we need anyway to kind of navigate the AI space, we already know a lot of it. Microsoft, for example, laid out its responsible AI principles years ago, and a lot of that is kind of reflected in some of the emerging regulation. So again, we have principles that we can turn to in terms of what the suppliers are doing, which are aligned with what the regulators are thinking. So in terms of our early approaches and whether the comfort level around that, we can look to that. But we also have our as lawyers, we've also got our ethical standards that we need to adhere to. And again, looking at that for guidance as well should help us to navigate this. And I think it's at the core just ensuring that your concerns, whomever you're going to be working with, understand those concerns and can assure you that their products or their services address them. And in our case, we do that. We talk about our responsible AI policies. We back it up by contractual commitments. So I think it's satisfying yourself, asking the questions that you're unsure of, to stimulate the discussions that give you the assurance that you need. But I think regulation in this space is welcome, and we will embrace it because I think it will give us all certainty.
Yeah. Ewan, did you want to add to that?
I just think that regulation can also be a driver for innovation as well. And we developed in the financial services sector primarily because the new consumer duty there actually requires firms to do much more to test their communications. I mean, all their communications, whether it's contract or pre-coms or whatever. They need to then monitor the outcome for the consumer and actually whether they've, in the round, understood it and act on that and simplify them further if they're still misunderstanding it. So that's been a massive driver for innovation in financial services, and actually one of the reasons why Amplified does what we do. But I think there are lots of barriers, and I think you've got to work really closely, form a partnership between the innovation and the eventual users, in this case, law professionals, legal firms, and so on, to make sure you understand whether there are details of regulation that might be a barrier, or perceptions that might be barriers. There's lots of challenges, and you need to understand that and work together with the potential clients, I think, in developing the innovation. Too often I see innovation fail because it's a nice, shiny thing it's a solution looking for a problem. And I think you've got to understand the problem and understand the issues that surround the problem and then innovate into that space. And I think that's where you do it much more effectively and in a much more market-friendly way.
Yeah, and keeps it targeted. And so I was going to come to you, Chris. I mean, one of the event today is an example of where the things that SRA as a regulator can do to really kind of work with the sector and the tech sector to, hopefully identify and deal with any potential barriers. But Chris, could you say a little bit more about the work of the SRA to, really help with the wider scale adoption of technology?
Yeah, sure. So I think to start with, it has already been highlighted, the fact that we have the principles-based approach is really, really important. And that's the approach that the government has taken with the framework in this jurisdiction as well, which is quite important. I was at a session yesterday and getting to that keeping up with the technology point with someone saying that I forgot which jurisdiction, that just before ChatGPT came out, they had their magic framework, really prescriptive. ChatGPT came out, and its next day it was kind of obsolete. So I think that's really, really important. So we're keeping that principle-leveled approach, which puts the responsibility on a firm for the outcomes that they achieve, but we're kind of agnostic about the tech being used at the moment. But we complement that with insights and hints and tips on how firms can comply and do the right thing. Is anyone familiar here with our AI risk outlook on the use of AI in the legal sector? Anyone? A few nods? A few.
You're getting a few nods.
A few nods. Well, that's good. Sometimes we get blank facing. We need to do more to focus. So things like that, supporting the principles, is where we're at the moment. We will have to consider whether we need to do more around formal guidance in light of the government framework, and we will do that. And to inform that, as Aileen said, it's really important that we that we do keep in touch. So we work together with other regulators. We're members of Regulatory Response Unit, which is part of the Law Tech UK, which involves all the legal regulators, but also the Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, isn't it? Information Commissioner's Office, Financial Conduct Authority, where there's quite often crossover, etc., to try and make sure that we're all understanding what's happening and helping joining up there. We are looking at how we can get closer to the technology in real time. And so our first trial is with you and an Amplify on that document intelligibility, where we are working with Amplify and the University of Nottingham to see how things are developing practice, kind of understand what benefits that has, what opportunities, but it also helps us understand how things are developing with regulation in mind as well. So it helps us get closer. We will be exploring later this year whether we need to do, whether we should do, whether there's benefits and demand in us doing a bit more of a formal sandbox type thing, which would bring together law firms and tech companies so that both of them are working together and we can get closer there. And we already have what we call SRA Innovate, which is our front door service, where anybody who has got a sort of innovation idea or think about pushing through can come to us for advice around the regulatory issues that are involved. So we can offer advice around our regulation, but we can also kind of hook up around with other regulators and other people who have an interest in the sector to bring all of that together. We're also looking later this year to do some research around what further support small firms need. We've mentioned the particular challenges they face, so try and hear directly from them around where they think the barriers are and the challenges, and what more we as a regulator can do to help them with those.
That's great, thank you. And I was going to come out to the floor in a moment. I had one other question, which was sort of building on your talk earlier, Anjali, in terms of, and I think, one of the reasons we asked Anjali to come and talk at the beginning of the session was, highlighting, some of the examples of what's available already. But I do have a number of conversations with people where they say, look, I just don't want to touch it. There is still a barrier for some people. And so I suppose I was looking to use the expertise on the panel here about any insights or kind of observations you can make about, how you get confidence about, using AI and it being secure. How do you know whether the outputs are reliable? So I wondered if I could come to you each in turn, maybe John first, for those, hands-on kind of observations of how you overcome that concern.
Yeah, look, and that's the biggest concern with lawyers these days, which is, how do I try it? Well, it's really easy. It's really easy to try, okay? Test everything. Have a look what's out there. I spend my life talking to lawyers and law firms, saying, what is right for the law firm? What kind of solutions are there? Then test them. Security-wise, you need to do your tests on the security, and the bigger law firms that are in the room have very robust systems for security. Understand that they're doing a lot of the hard work with these solutions to make sure that they're compliant and that data is going where it's expected to go and not going anywhere else. But try stuff. If you don't try, you'll never know. And that's the important part, which a lot of law firms think, well, I just can't do it. But if you test and if you try in the right environments, you'll get the results that you need. Some things are going to work and some things aren't. And I know everyone's really busy, but actually, if you put a little bit of time, the right solutions are out there, and they're the solutions that are going to actually make you more profitable and make life much easier. Thank you.
Anjali, did you want to add?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, John. I think a lot of this is, first of all, it's not jumping on the bandwagon. It's kind of like, what do I need AI for? So it's working out what your use cases are and then go, who am I going to talk to? Because there are lots of suppliers out there. But then actually narrowing that list and going, how can I be assured that, all these concerns I've got, where's my data being handled, who's getting access to my data, what is their development roadmap for their systems, all those questions the questions in your head ask them to your supplier, feel empowered to ask those questions, because a good supplier will engage with you and will answer those questions and will provide you with the assurance you need, to make that judgment call as to whether you're comfortable, trying. And, I think like John said, it is worth probably starting small, trying, working out some use cases that you want to explore with technology or AI, and then, starting small, and then if it works, do that risk-reward analysis, cost-risk analysis, and go, is this really improving productivity? Because if it is, then, it perhaps is worth expanding, because, I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that, our clients are demanding more of us, and, shying away from utilizing tools that's going to increase productivity and pass on some savings to clients isn't necessarily the answer. It's just educating ourselves and taking the leap, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Did you want to?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think there's probably two things I'd draw on. I mean, one is there is an obligation, I think, on innovators to actually manage some of those concerns and adapt the innovation to actually mitigate those concerns. So, for example, a lot of innovators don't necessarily start off with governance of their technology or their firm as the main thing they're thinking about. They're entrepreneurial, they're technologists, there might be all sorts of things, but they're not good governors in that sense. But I think for us, we were very clear from the outset that governing how our tool works, how it uses data, the degree to which we train our algorithms using client data or not, which we don't because of the concerns that we were seeing in financial services and legal firms and so on. We've adapted what we do to help to smooth our entry into the market. So I think that's one thing. Innovators need to be aware of this, and it's not up to the client to adapt always. It's up to the innovator sometimes to do that. I think the second thing for those firms looking to adopt innovation and to try it out, and testing is absolutely the right thing to do, have a think first about your risk appetite and your ability to absorb failure. Because innovation has some failure along the way. If you try 5 things out, there's every chance that 1, 2, maybe 4 of those things won't work quite as well as you thought they were going to do. So for a big firm, maybe you've got lots of capacity to fail. And actually they'll have an innovation program and they'll expect a certain degree of success and failure along the way. For a smaller firm, maybe you're looking for something that's a little bit further down the development line, that's a little bit more off the shelf, that's been highly tested lots of times by lots of other organizations. And that lessens your innovation risk, but maybe means that you're adopting it a little bit further down the line. So have a think about how you want to approach integrating into innovation, and put the onus on the innovator to actually adapt to your needs, and don't just accept it in the way that it's being presented to you. Yeah. Ask questions, ask about their governance, how are they managing your data, understand what sits under the bonnet a bit.
Yeah,
absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think, and that's where the credential of your supplier comes in. It's like, look at their track record. Look who else are they in business with in this space. And I mentioned before, we've got people like CMS, for example, on LinkedIn. Sharing videos in terms of how they are using tools. It's worth, before you trying, then having a look at that and go, oh, are these use cases that are pertinent to me? Would I benefit from this tool? In the same way. So yeah, I completely am aligned with this idea of the innovator kind of being on the journey with you and taking some accountability. And certainly on Microsoft's behalf, I could say that's certainly our approach in terms of giving you that comfort and engaging to ensure that you are assured and you're clear and you are in control. I think the other thing is you want to remain in control of whatever you're putting into because behind all this is the cloud, and so again you want to be in control of these tools and whatever you're putting in, and that it is your supplier is doing what they say they're doing, and they back that up. I think the assurance around that comes from multiple places, but one really easy win is, if you've promised it to me on this call, you're telling me this is how it works. Is it in your contract terms then? How do I rely on what you're saying today? So I think that level of conversation and assurance is absolutely welcome and should be in this space.
And Chris, did you want to add anything from how we view those kind of responsibilities?
No, I mean, I think I agree with all that's been said. Obviously, the responsibility does lie with the law firm, so you need to make sure you understand. Just one other thing that came to my mind is when you're working with the provider, there is a responsibility to be able to explain how it's working to clients. So it's really important that when you're speaking to your provider, you're getting that information about how to understand how the system's working, and there's documentation of that so that you can explain that to clients if you need to. And then you also need to think about how you tell clients that AI is being used and how it's being used on their case and at what stage. So I think that's really, really important. And just coming back to kind of one of the things that came up earlier is around the training and safeguarding, as with anything else, is equally important for AI. I mean, one important thing is that generative AI isn't a search engine, as Anjali said earlier. It takes patterns and creates new examples, and we've all heard the cases. The cases where a lawyer has been quoting made-up precedent in court cases and getting in hot water. So I think just training around things like that are really important, and getting those prompts right, and getting it to quote references, only using real cases in this jurisdiction, etc. So those things are really important too. And then the final thing is just that as we've heard a lot of, in a lot of cases, the AI will be an information source for a human to use to inform their decision. And again, Anjali's examples of what she was doing on the train this morning, it's brilliant to have that kind of draft all set out for you in quick time, but then the lawyer checks it and makes sure that it's actually kind of correct and doing the job that it needs to do to offer that competent service to a client.
Yeah. So I was going to open up the conversation to everyone here. If Warren can come to a question from the floor. And if you could just tell us who you are and ask your question. Thank you.
1, 2. Oh,
yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Tim Parkman from Market AI. Specific question for Anjali. Going back actually to your very interesting keynote this morning. And it concerns sort of new uses for AI and concerns about them. I think you said, if I heard it correctly, that you had used, or it had a capability, one of the tools, to read the emails of people who worked on your team and then kind of pre-prepare a summary of potential strengths and weaknesses of that person ahead of an appraisal. And I just wondered, how good is it, and to what extent did it either confirm or make you challenge any preconceived notions that you might have had about that particular individual? Because it seems like a fascinating and slightly, if I should say it, threatening development of it. Could you say a bit more about that? It was really interesting. Thank you.
Oh no. So this is about my email. So critically, we need to remember that your co-pilot isn't going around searching everybody's emails. Its access is restricted by whatever restrictions apply generally to your 365 service. But for me, this is someone I've worked with consistently for a period of time. So I go look at my emails and interactions with that person. So my emails, my team's messages with that person, based on those interactions. And there are some specific questions that I wanted it to answer. And it was illuminating because, like you said, I may have gone into this with my idea of how I think this person is. And, I was getting things like, well, this person is professional, articulate, quite clear with timelines, et cetera, et cetera. But these are a few things that this person could do differently. And this is the reason for that. And then it gave me a list of times when that person may not have been clear and accurate in what they're asking for, where I've had to go back and say, but please could you clarify? And, it looks at instances where that's happened, and it's kind of said, well, I think this person may, want to think about, for example, how it provides instructions, how it communicates X to Y, that sort of thing. So it isn't kind of threatening in the sense of, trolling in boxes and kind of analyzing you. But yeah, it's very much about your communication with the person, and it's very much something that we are comfortable with on the basis that, you're asking me for objective feedback, and this is a great way of me starting that objective feedback. And it did help to lessen the degree of subjectivity that would have otherwise been in that feedback, because it gave me all those links and emails and chats where, if it said something, it's backed up by the fact that this is what happened on that occasion. The person didn't provide you with this, you've had to ask for it. Or on that occasion, the person jumped on a call really quickly on an urgent matter, which shows collaboration and, all sorts of kind of really insightful feedback like that. So yeah, it's incredibly impressive outside of just the documents and drafting, just enabling you as a person, which is kind of what this is. It's your co-pilot, it's not in charge. It's enabling you, so yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Are there other questions? So, yes, there's one here, and then we'll come to you next. Hi.
Hi, Sarah Rose from Mills and Reeve. We've just been talking about sort of some of the potentially more negative sides of things, and obviously the need to review work and products that come out. And obviously there's sort of the input, the output, and the process phase. I just wondered from the sort of SRA perspective whether or not you see, as this develops, like the uptake is kind of increasing, there will be a need to look at the minimum terms, for example, to see how we're responding to claims arising from this, because Anjali makes the point about having your consumer terms, and making sure you've got your contractual exclusions, etc. But ultimately, that's going to delay the process of a claim if you've got to go off and have multiple supplier disputes. And I just wonder whether you've got a feeling for whether this could be like a strict liability almost situation, if you think that's a discussion that's going to need to come down the line.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things that's raised when we're talking to people is the issue of liability and insurance. And there are some challenges in the insurance sector as insurers, as everyone else is trying to work out what the risks are here, how it goes, etc. At the moment, our minimum terms and conditions are kind of fairly straightforward. You have to have insurance for the advice you're giving, any negligence. And again, back to being tech agnostic, it doesn't matter whether you're using AI or not. So there will be discussions, and in fact, we've already been at some fora where discussions are happening with insurers, with brokers, with law firms, with us in the room about how things might develop over time. I think what you mean is that there isn't an answer to this at the moment, and everybody's trying to work it out. So I think the most important thing, where we can play a real role, is to help those discussions along the way. But yeah, it's a really valid point.
And I'll tell you something else that's really interesting. 80% of the solutions I see are outside of the UK. So where does that sit within our framework? That if you have a piece of tech that's in California that then comes to Mills Reeve, then it's like, where does the liability sit? Or if it's somewhere in Europe, does that sit with the EU Act? And then it becomes even more complicated. I'm glad that Chris is here.
That's really, and I think it is. It's a continuing conversation, isn't
Absolutely.
it? Very much. There is another question here.
Hi, I'm Glory, a PhD researcher in law tech from Bangor University. We've had an amazing section, but I have some questions because we've all been talking about solicitors and how AI can help, law firms and law industries. And so my question goes, would we ever come to an era where AI is used in explanatory law codification for non-legal experts so they could understand their, pathways to take? If you have a client that understands the legal landscape, it's also beneficial for the solicitor. So how can AI be used in this process, and are we ever going to come to that era? Because most of the research I've seen in law tech has to deal with law firms and how to, enhance the jobs of solicitors, and that's my question.
Yeah. So I think, and is the question very much about that kind of expanding the reach and access to kind of legal advice that could come through tech alongside lawyers?
It's in that area, but it's more of how can AI be used in, explanatory legal codification so people could understand what pathways to take, what legal pathways to take.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to pick that one up?
Sure. Some of the work that we do is absolutely about making all legal communications, but particularly where it's consumer-facing, more understandable. And so there are principles of doing that. There's ways of simplifying documents and making them much more understandable. So that's the first step, I think. That reduces a barrier to understanding some legal aspects. I think the other development that AI is going to see is actually a help for consumers in doing exactly what you're talking about, in interpreting the wider world and areas where they may not be expert, but delivering that information to them in a really simple, actionable way. And so we're seeing the development. We've had chatbots and things like that that are often driven by AI for years, but they're very much kind of a to and fro. What you might get is actually kind of an avatar, an AI bot that sits with you and helps you to interpret things that you may not be expert in, you may be confused by. It might draw additional material that's more understandable to you and actually sits as an aid to you. And I think we're seeing some really exciting developments in that, and I think that's going to help not only legal services, but lots of other areas as well, where people are not expert, nor should they be, but they need to make an informed decision or an informed action, and I think it can help them to approach that in a much more informed and easier to access way.
Any other thoughts?
I think I could draw a little bit on some of the things we've seen through, we've been lucky enough, and you're involved with our latest, with getting government funding for what's called Regulator Pioneer Fund, where we look at access to justice projects. And some of those in the past has seen AI generated or AI involved in those sorts of chatbots. So, for example, charities using a chatbot that helps people identify and address their care rights, for example. So it is happening. I guess it's the scale of change and the commerciality of that is the kind of the challenge here, with the focus on, understandably, with a lot of development around where it will make the most money. So there is a challenge there. But also, just really interesting, I've been at some sessions around access to justice, and say 3 years ago, you would go to these things, and all that was being talked about is how to campaign to get more legal aid, which probably isn't going to happen. And that's kind of accepting what people are now talking about is how can technology help triage so that the lawyers are focusing on those things where they're really needed, and actually you can provide access through technology for other stuff, and that can have a huge impact. So the mood is definitely changing, and I think that we will see more and more developments in that area.
Yeah. We probably have time for one more question if there was anything burning with anyone. No, well, then one of the things that I don't think we've touched upon as much as maybe I thought we might was the kind of cost aspects of this, and whether, actually one of the barriers could be cost. Are there any thoughts about, how to actually, get some of the advantages, but in a realistic way? John, do you want to comment?
It's very much a buyer's market right now. So there are some people that I know in the room who have been quoted a price for a piece of technology up here, and actually right now, law firms, because this is the new era that we're entering, there is every ability that whatever the technology provider says is the list price, you must find your budget and where it works and where it creates a return on investment. Technology is not there to kind of look good, it's there to do a job. And the job is that if I install something, a solution, an AI solution, it has to have a return on investment. So I spend X, but I've saved that much time, which for lawyers equates to money, and it doesn't matter if you work on a fixed fee or an hourly rate, always you're going to come back to how much time did that take, and if it saves time, then it's going to save money. If the solution saves that much extra time, then it's going to be profitable, and that's the important part. So the answer is, although it may look like it's really expensive, in reality it's not.
Yes, of course, let's get the microphone to you.
Shadi Anjum again. My question is to Ewan. Will there be any global regulations for those people who are setting up their law firms in multiple countries? Because SRA can only deal with the United Kingdom practice. So if people who are setting up their practices in different countries, so how the global community can be protected, and where they will go if there is any data breach or if there is any issue with the technology? Thank you.
I mean, that's a really interesting question. It's a challenge that's been around for a long time, because you're right, there's not a lot of global regulation in that sense. I think the closest we see that is in areas like money laundering, where we've got FATF and others that then filters through to national regulation but coordinates it at an international level. It's a challenge because there is no sort of supranational organisation that can do that. I think the best thing that we see is where regulators collaborate very closely together and share a drive towards reaching certain goals or outcomes, maybe in a slightly different way, but in a coordinated way, I think. And so I think in AI, there's a lot of conversation at the moment between the EU and between the US government, lots of countries around the world, India as well, China too, around trying to align different approaches. The individual rules may not be exactly the same, but I think it's opening up this conversation in a much more collegiate way. And I think that's really helping. And I think we see this again, referred back to financial services. We see financial service regulators involved in, there are a number of pan-international regulatory bodies that have innovation-type sandboxes where you actually share innovation across multiple international regulators. So they see innovation, they see the challenges that innovation might create, but also the opportunities, and they collectively sort of soak that up and have a conversation about how best to deal with it. So I don't think we're going to get global regulation that solves it. I think a collaborative approach between national regulators is probably as close as we're going to get.
Great, thank you. I am sadly going to have to draw this one to a close. We promised you sort of practical hints and tips, and I think there's been a lot of those, with insight. I was going to just end with John, Anjali, Ewan. I wonder whether, if you want to give people a takeaway, from the conversation today, or, what they then take into work this afternoon, if you've got a little soundbite for us, I'm going to come to you in turn. John?
Look, what I said before, which is test and try and see what's out there. You'll be amazed. I'm happy to help at any stage, but it's experience what's out there and try and test and see what works.
Thank you. Andrew?
I agree. I think observing from the sidelines is just not a viable option. It is taking the opportunity to observe and try, as John says, and just start small and explore, and then work out if you want to expand. Costs should probably not be a major deterrent because there are so many different models out there in terms of how you access the technologies that are available. And a last point just on, if you just think about the technologies that you need as an organization versus just as a lawyer, you'll find that there are technologies out there that you can leverage for the benefit of the wider organization, which doesn't result in you having to purchase multiple different AI technologies to achieve, some of the outcomes we've discussed today.
Thank you. Ewan?
Thanks, Aileen. Collaborate. I talked about that, but get involved if you can. I think some of the best innovations are where you see the potential client organizations and the innovator working together to develop technology or to develop the application of technology. And I think the SRA can play a really important role in that, as can other regulators. Great to hear about the sandbox potentially coming along. I think that bringing together people with a problem and people with a potential solution and actually bringing that partnership together in an open, collaborative method, fantastic results.
Thank you. I do have some very final thoughts that I want to share before we part ways today, but just in the meantime, I wonder if you'd join me in saying thank you very much to the panel for this great discussion. Thank you. Thank you to all of you for your engagement today. I've had as many fascinating conversations outside the room as, the great conversations we've had inside the room. And I think that opportunity to swap notes and meet new people is one of the, key strengths of events like this. So we can't do that without all of you. So we are very, very grateful for your contributions. And I do want to just thank again all of our great speakers. We've had, I think, some fascinating insights, starting from Anjali at the beginning, but also in the panel sessions. And I think, there's a number of takeaways and kind of thoughts that, I'm going to keep with me. I think, this observation about incremental steps and in being, quite often we will talk, or certainly I will talk about the opportunities in the law and, that space, but also for firms or small firms or sole practitioners, just in the day-to-day, the opportunities to enable you to do more and not necessarily the legal specific issues. I think that's come across very strongly. And I think the other takeaway that is really important for me is this point about, well, there's there's always opportunities to test, trial, learn, and build. And I think that also came through in lots of our conversations. And we certainly want to ensure that the SRA plays a part in that. So do please get in touch if you have other ideas. I should also thank a number of people who've given me ideas for, how we build on this conference and how we share the information from. So I'm certainly going to take those on board. I also just want to thank the team for putting this on today. I think this has been a great event, and I hope you will join us for some lunch afterwards as well. Before I say cheerio, I do just want to highlight that your feedback is incredibly important, and it really helps us understand, what you get out of the events. And so, if you're able to, give us feedback and let us know, we would really appreciate that, and we will always act on that too. Lunch, I think, will be available in the area where we all met for teas and coffees. So I'm not going to stand between you and that any longer. But do please use the opportunity to network some more and have further conversations. Thank you all very, very much.